Hello and welcome to Alphamille Top of Mind. I am so honored and so excited to welcome a very dear guest. Her name is Melina Sánchez Montañés, and she is a managing director of the Innovation Fund at the Alfred Landecker Foundation in Berlin. Melina, welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here.
And I would like to start out by saying that we've known each other for quite some time. And it was a very interesting period of time for both of us. I was at Moose Partners, a single family office at the time. And as colleagues, we were working on the implementation of the investment portfolio analytics software. And you were a superstar then, you're a superstar now, and it's so exciting to talk to you today.
Thank you for your vote of confidence.
So I would like to start out by asking you how you have found your path to really being quite unique in combining the public and the private. And explain what I mean. You know exactly what I mean, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, happy to tell you a little bit, and the audience also a little bit about my path, which I think it's quite unconventional because I started in diplomacy. Remember when I was in college and even in high school, my dream was to become an ambassador. I don't think that I knew what that meant back then, but that was my dream. And I did work for the public sector for a while. So for the Spanish government and the European External Action Service of the European Union. And then I realized that as much as I shared that public mindset, that social impact mindset, the work wasn't quite entrepreneurial for me. It was very slow and bureaucratic, as the public sector is known for good reasons.
Yep.
And so my senior year of college, I decided to pivot completely. And that's how I ended up at Novus Partners, the growth stage fintech startup where we collaborated, as you mentioned before, through portfolio analytics.
Mm-hmm.
And back then, I didn't know much about finance. I didn't know what portfolio management was. It was a very big learning curve. And I also started to understand what it meant to work in high growth environments, especially in the financial sector. But then after a couple of years, I also realized that I was missing that social impact, that as much as I loved the job and the learning, and obviously helping clients like you, I was missing that connection with my social core. So I decided to go back to school and explore the intersection of social impact and entrepreneurship and investing. And that's how I found myself in the impact venture capital industry, which is what I've been doing for the last 3 years in Israel, the US, and now in Europe through, as you mentioned before, the Innovation Fund of the Alfred Landecker Foundation.
But you're being very modest. So talk to me a little bit about the schools that you went to. Do not be modest because no, I'll tell you why. Because a lot of people, you know, in the past, I don't know, 10 to 20 years, are feeling increasingly that values is not something that we should be leaving at the door of the office, that there is perhaps a way to be yourself and to express who you are and what you stand for, and not having to lead an existence where there's you outside of work and there's you at the office. And I think that this is why it's very important, because when you talk about your educational experience, also, if you could just say, do all of us have to do dual degrees? You know what I mean? To combine it, like, is there any other way? Have you thought of an easier path?
Yeah, and perhaps even before talking about my educational background, my personal background, I think, informs the choices that I made when it came to degrees and universities. So I come from a small, port town from the southeast of Spain, a very close-minded, xenophobic society, a lot of immigration from Northern Africa, plus most of the people where I come from are farmers, and obviously during the financial crisis, we got very badly hit, including my own family. So when I went to university, I already had this desire to understand how the financial world works, why people like my father, like my family, extended family, couldn't get financing for greenhouses when so many other people were getting richer and richer. And so at Yale, I decided to major in economics exactly because of that. Although I must say that, when you do a degree in the US, especially a major in a liberal arts school, you don't really get specialized. Like, I kind of call myself an economist, just like a student that have gone through like 4 years of purely economic training in Europe, for example, has. But I think it was the spark. And then after my experience at Novus Partners and thinking about that relationship between social impact and entrepreneurship and investing, I thought that no one degree could really capture the holistic mindset that I had. So I didn't think that, for example, a master in public policy would be enough to understand how to marry those two worlds. And I didn't think that an MBA alone would be able to help me understand those two worlds. Also because I had come from a policy background when I worked for government and also through another nonprofit that I had started. So I decided that perhaps combining those two, and there are programs that can actually combine these two degrees in 3 years instead of having to do 2 + 2, right, would be the perfect pathway for me. So that was my reasoning, but each person who does a double degree has a different path, a different reasoning why. For me was, trying to understand from 2 points of view. So from the business, the investing side, and also from the public mindset, the social impact mindset, how there could be a powerful combination there.
And so where did you go to school?
Right. I always missed that detail. So I said I did my undergrad at Yale College, amazing experience, forever grateful for those years. And then my masters were at Harvard Kennedy School of Government. That was a master's in public administration. And my MBA was at Dartmouth, so at the Tech School of Business.
Wonderful educational and university choices. And that brings you to the investment world. And why don't we now talk just a little bit about, first of all, what you do, and secondly, what is impact tech? Because your investment strategies involve some of the very, very interesting cutting edge concepts that I had to look up. I had to look it up, and I wrote an article about it, and I put it on our website because that's how I learn about things, by writing about them. So tell us, what is impact tech? First of all, what do you do? And secondly, what is impact tech?
Yeah, and thank you for your curiosity. I think that a lot more people should be curious about impact and how to ensure that our capitalist systems can be more inherently impactful and socially minded. So impact tech is, in summary, the use of technology to benefit people on the planet. So that means that with a technology that is contributing to a specific challenge, and for example, you can think about the Sustainable Development Goals by the United Nations, whether it's ending poverty or addressing mental health diseases. There are technologies that can help and contribute to solve these challenges. And that's fundamentally, in a simple words, what impact tech is. Now, impact tech investing is the concept of investing in these technologies. And usually we've thought about impact investing as more of a philanthropic concept where foundations would donate money to nonprofits that then provide services or goods to people in need or to specific causes. And that's a concept that I think has been evolving because there is a lot of good that can be done also by utilizing capital for good in an investing manner. So for example, what I do at my job and what I've been doing for the last few years is invest in impact startups. So startups whose products are solving specific global challenges. An example could be, for example, increasing the yield of a specific crops. That's what we call agtech, or developing specific technologies for increasing the lifespan of people with certain non-communicable diseases, or improving educational outcomes through specific behavioral technologies that are scientifically proven. So there are many use cases of impact tech startups.
So if we deal with a lot of fintech startups, and if they come to me and say, do I qualify? Because I feel, almost everybody feels that when they're doing something, especially it's in a startup format where you really work so hard, almost everybody is going to feel like they're solving some incredibly important problem. So which ones would you say, yes, I definitely want to talk to this person? And which ones are you going to say, you know what, buddy, you think your work is extremely important, but this doesn't, even touch impact? What is like a simple dividing line? And also, what is responsible tech? Because I also like the impact versus responsible tech distinction.
Exactly. And this brings me exactly to that differentiation between internal and external impact. So any company should, at the very least, think about its internal stakeholders and its internal operations. And that's what usually we call ESG, environmental, social, and governance factors, which is very popular in public markets, and increasingly more also in private markets. So for example, thinking about diversity and inclusion in your own company, thinking about carbon footprint, and that any financial institution, any fintech company can do that. And probably most of them, hopefully, should be already looking at these factors, because I think it's the minimum that we can do to ensure that this works for everyone, for all the stakeholders, and not just for shareholders, right? Now, external impact, which is where impact tech really comes from, is not only looking at the internal operations of a company, how you treat your employees, how you govern your company, but also looking at how your product or service, so the reason for that company to exist, is solving a specific challenge. So in the fintech arena, for example, we can think of investment platforms that are channeling investment dollars towards, for example, in the US, it's very popular, CDFIs. So specific loans that are dedicated to improve communities that are in need, whether it's through infrastructural projects or other type of projects. And when I was in the US, for example, I invested in C-Node, which is an early stage startup that is exactly an investment platform for CDFI dollars. Another potential fintech, impact-related fintech startup comes from the insurance world. And probably you have heard about it, Lemonade. It's a gigantic tech company, not a startup anymore, actually, went public a few years ago. And here I also want to bring the concept of benefiting stakeholders versus contributing to the solutions. When a startup comes in, they really need to understand whether the investor wants to contribute indirectly or directly through their capital. It can get a little bit tricky to see that differentiation, but let me give you an example. Benefiting stakeholders would be the role of Lemonade. So Lemonade has premium, insurance premium and the unused premium. They are investing into social causes that the client is choosing in advance. They are not solving a problem per se. It's not that this insurance company was born to solve, for example, the fact that certain communities don't have access to insurance. That's not the reason they exist. But through their product, in an interlock manner. So every unit of their product is contributing to a cause, right, that the client directly chooses. So it's benefiting society, even if indirectly. So Lemonade, I would also qualify as an impact startup. It's just not contributing to a specific impact challenge per se. So that's a second example. And then one more that I want to bring from Europe is Reimagine. Reimagine is also an early stage startup based out of Berlin. You might have heard about it.
You told me about it, as a matter of fact. It's great.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a company that is trying to bring revenue finance models to impact startups. So the problem that they are trying to solve is that the alignment of incentives between investors, right, the people in the cap table, and startup founders, sometimes it's not completely aligned, because one wants to maximize profits as soon as possible, and the other one might have other objectives, create, for example, long-term gains for different stakeholders, might not want to sell the company, after 3 years. So how to ensure that the capital is aligned? And Reimagine is trying to redefine that specifically towards impact startups that have sometimes different priorities, right? They want to maximize impact as well. So then Reimagine, I would consider a company that is in the most impactful bucket within impact tech.
Wonderful. So what do you think anyone who is considering entering the financial services world, or doing a startup, or working for a VC investing, right, in these types of organizations, either way, as anyone who is currently at school or recently graduated, what advice would you give them? Like, where would they go to explore this? What would they read up? Who would they talk to?
For impact tech, right?
Yes.
And impact tech investing.
Yes.
So first of all, I mean, there are so few resources out there, unfortunately, because it's an emerging sector, right? So for example, just to give you a sense, 10% of venture capital investments in Europe are impact tech investments. And in the US, in Europe it's 14%, and in the US it's 10%. So, I mean, it's a substantial share of the market, but it's still small enough. And we need to catch up when it comes to actual resources. So there is no, for example, in major MBAs or in major policy programs, there's usually one class on impact investing at best, but there's no, say, entire program around it. And there are some organizations that are helping to bridge the gap. So for example, for MBA students and master level students, for example, there is this MINT program, is MIINT. And it's organized by Wharton, and it's an impact investing pitch competition for students that are interested in exploring careers in impact investing. So they have actually a program, so a few courses that give people resources on how they should, for example, think about impact when they are evaluating a startup, in addition to the traditional, more investing background. So how to evaluate a startup, how to do due diligence, how to source, etc. So that's, for example, a resource. And I went through that program that I think was super valuable. And then there are some organizations that are also trying to fill that resource gap. So for example, in Israel, although it's a global organization, there is a Global Impact Tech Alliance, and it's an alliance of impact tech investors. And you don't see these types of alliances yet because there are so few impact tech investors right now and impact tech VCs, but they are a hub, like a resource hub for both the students and universities, and also investors that want to share insights, but also learn from each other. And they, for example, work with universities in Israel to give courses or do courses with the students about impact tech investing. So that's another organization that I would definitely look out for. And then at the end of the day, just like venture capital at large, it's all about networking and conferences, right? So going to the right spaces, knowing the right people, meeting the right startups, so that you build your network, you also build your expertise. You're able to compare and say, oh, I thought this company was impactful, but then I met this other one and this makes so much more sense. Or talking to investors that have been doing this for many years and understand, the nitty gritty of what it means to invest in impact investing. And there are lots of them in the US. So for example, SoCap is one that I would definitely recommend. It's, I think, the main impact investing conference, and a lot of impact investors and impact VC investors go there. So definitely that would be another thing that I would check out.
In your opinion, is impact tech, when it's being evaluated, is it entirely objective? Is it entirely subjective? Or is it somewhere in the middle? Because how much of your own values goes into that, right? Is it somewhere in between?
I mean, that's an excellent question. And to be honest, I don't have an exact answer because it's never black or white, right? As you said, it's somewhere in the middle, in the sense that a lot of social issues, I mean, they're objectively important. For example, SDG 1, ending poverty, right? But then some impact investors will rather focus on affordable energy, right? So you're already making a decision about what area do you find you are more passionate about, you find the best opportunities in, and you think that you can contribute the most. So in some sense, everything has that personal bias, but then it's true that some topics are even more subjective than others. So for example, the area that I work on right now, safety tech, is one of such sectors that is really a gray zone, in the sense that safety tech is or are technologies that are facilitating safer online experiences. So if we think about the increasing online harms, whether it's online hate or sexual image-based sexual abuse online, there are technologies and organizations that would say, let's ban everything because children shouldn't be exposed to these, or it's better, we should prioritize security over privacy. And then there are people that would say, no, we want our privacy, but we also don't want to be exposed to grooming, or we don't want to be exposed to hateful messages from people we don't know. And is there a way of balancing those and ensuring that there is both privacy and there is safety? So this is an area, for example, where there's subjectivity, but at the end of the day, there's also some common ground of what those minimum values are for society.
And there's probably a discovery process there too, right? As companies are going through, as venture capitalists are going through the discovery process of where do you invest, right? Where do you send more of capital versus less, right? There's probably a discovery process there happening.
Absolutely. For example, one of the topics that I'm super passionate about these days is mental health, for good reasons, especially after COVID, even if COVID is not yet over. And I would say that 5 years ago, mental health was not an investable opportunity. A lot of VCs, didn't think mental health was a sector. And there had been some investments here and there, and obviously now there are unicorns and exits. But back 5 years ago, not that many people were talking about mental health. And now you have dedicated mental health funds in Europe, in the US, for example, What If Ventures here in Berlin, Masawa Fund. So definitely, impact is an evolving term, it's an evolving concept, and the sectors underneath it, the values that people embrace and that change over time, are definitely reflected in the way that investors are choosing sectors or segments and allocating their capital.
What's an example of an investment in like a startup that contributes to solving mental health problems? This is so new. This is literally something I've not even heard of this.
Oh my God, if I start talking about mental health, I would be talking for hours. But let me give you one example, and to bring it also home, sort of, to Germany. there is this mental health startup that was started in 2018. It's called Alphamille Life. It's a biotech company that is using psychedelics to understand if they are good use or potential use in medical therapies for especially serious mental health disorders. So psychedelics, as we know, commonly as drugs, obviously are illegal for the most part in most countries, but there might be some medical interventions where they can be helpful and even more helpful than traditional chemical drugs. So they do a lot of research and development. They obviously have or are undergoing clinical trials for their different compounds. And this startup, especially the psychedelics segment within mental health, is probably the fastest growing, the more hip one. And Alphamille Life went public last summer for, I think, hundreds of millions of dollars. So that's one example, but there are many, many more. Mental health is just a sector that, for good reasons, needs a lot of solutions at the moment.
Exactly. So your advice for startup founders, what would you say to someone who is kind of considering an idea or is passionate about a sector, you know, where for personal reasons they would like to come up with solutions, or someone who is nearing that you know, the time where they're going to come to you and say, give us the money? What is your advice?
Where to start? First of all, I think that one has to be true to oneself, right? And be honest along the process. The startup world and the VC world is a risky one, and it's not for everyone. And that means that there is going to be a lot of failure along the way, and potentially a lot of success. And one has to be very determined and very resilient to be able to build something from scratch and go through all those ups and downs. And one needs to be ready, you know, mentally for that. That's one. Second, I think that it's inevitable that impact will become more and more important over the years. I mean, we see it now with COP26 happening in the UK. Everyone talks about the fact that we need more commitment and not less commitment. And those entrepreneurs that have impactful ideas that obviously are well researched, you know, that are based on a stakeholder engagement, right, that are backed by data and good research. Those entrepreneurs are gonna have a lower cost of capital because they are gonna be able to access both traditional VC funding and impact tech VC funding. And therefore they will have more choice. They will be able to negotiate better terms. And we see that already. Also, these entrepreneurs are going to be able to attract more and better talent. And there are already stats also out there that say that impactful startups, impactful companies have less turnover and attract better people. So I would say if you're thinking about an idea, a potential venture, definitely see what ticks you, what social, environmental problem really means something to you, and work on it, because chances are that you're going to have more chances to success than traditional entrepreneurs.
So to conclude, what is top of mind for you?
I see a lot of money floating around in the venture capital scene, both in the US, in Europe, in Asia, everywhere. And I think it's important to ensure that that money is responsible or responsibly used. I think that top of mind right now, beyond impact, is ensuring that companies are not growing for the sake of growing, that they do care about their employees, that they do care about making a difference, that they do care about their larger stakeholders. And we see that there is more LP pressure, there is so limited partner pressure, there is more pressure from future employees. And I think that this wave of ESG is just only the start. And I'm very, very excited to see where it goes and how we can walk the talk, because I think there has been a lot of talk in the past few years.
Yes.
Exactly. A lot of talk. But we
Mhm.
need to show results. We need to show examples. We need to give visibility to those companies that are doing a really, really great job when it comes to thinking about these different models of managing and growing a company.
Wonderful. Melina, thank you so much for your time today. It is always a pleasure to see you. You are an inspiration to a lot of people who are going to want to think about both the business side of things and also the value side of things. And as we're going more and more in the direction where you do not have to choose, but it's the exact opposite. You will get rewarded for considering both. I think it's going to be a better world, honestly, for
I totally agree.
us.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being with us today.
No, thank you for inviting me. Bye.
Bye.